Now, as I said, my name is Tom Carpenter. I'm the CTO here at CWNP, and that basically means that I am managing the teams that build the content and create the certifications and exams and training courses as well. So a lot of things going on here at CWNP over the last few months, including the release of new versions of the CWSP and CWDP exams, and now this upcoming release of the CWAP exam on June 28th. So we are moving forward with these new exams and including new content related to 802.11 wireless networks, as well as new content related to the support services and systems that we need to make those wireless networks work. So the topics today will be the exam details, which have not changed as far as the specifications for the exam from an exam taking perspective, but they have changed from the perspective of objectives. So we'll talk about those as well, and we'll talk briefly about some training materials and things like that that will be available down the road. So first of all, just a quick reminder where CWAP fits in the CWNP certification offerings. Of course, we have the CWNA as the starting point for those that want to become either a certified professional or a certified expert. The CWNA is required in order to actually have a CWAP certification status. You can take the CWAP exam first, but until you've also passed the CWNA exam, you would not actually be a CWAP professional. So it's important to know that CWNA is a prerequisite. CWSP and CWDP are not prerequisites to CWAP, but they are, in addition to CWAP, prerequisites to the CWNE, the Certified Wireless Network Expert Certification. The CWTS, we're often asked where it fits in the chain, and I'll tell you where it is. It's a certification that stands alone at this time, and it is a little below CWNA, and so it's a little easier exam than the CWNA exam, and it's actually a good starting point for those who are brand new to wireless. So rather than just jumping into CWNA and biting the big bullet, they can instead take a look at CWTS and go through that process instead, and then they can move on to CWNA later. So it's a good optional starting point, but it is not required. You can start at the CWNA and then move on through the professional level certifications. Of course, for more information about all of our certifications, you can visit the CWNP.com website and click on certifications. Now, we also have upcoming our New Orleans Wi-Fi Trek conference. I just tweeted this morning how to go to New Orleans and master Wi-Fi because, well, the reality is we want to go to New Orleans and master Wi-Fi, right? Not just master Wi-Fi. So if you want a great trip to New Orleans, a good time to hang out with some wireless experts and learn more about wireless technology and what's going on in the wireless industry, then, of course, the Wi-Fi Trek Conference in New Orleans from September the 28th through the 30th would be a great place to be. In addition to the conference itself, pre-conference, there will be training classes offered for our various certifications. So if you're interested in attending a training class and bundling in the conference, there are some price discounts for that as well. You can learn more information by going to cwnp.com/NOLA, or if you just go to cwnp.com right now on the main page, there is a link that takes you to the New Orleans Wi-Fi Trek Conference. Now, let's talk about CWAP and begin with the exam details. First of all, the exam, as we're moving forward with all of our certifications, the naming has changed as to what you're looking for at the Pearson VUE website. Instead of the old PW0 that was there for so many years, and all of the certifications started with that three-letter form, PW0. Now the certifications start with their certification name, which makes it a lot easier. So, for example, CWSP starts with CWSP, CWDP starts with CWDP, and of course, CWAP starts with CWAP. And it is exam number 402. So CWAP-402 is the new exam number that will be live and available on June 28th. It is a 90-minute exam, just like the rest, and there are 60 questions on the exam. Now, to give you a bit of information here, I'm often asked, how difficult are the questions on, say, CWAP as compared to CWNA and CWTS? Well, if you're familiar with the Bloom's taxonomy, then I'll give you the information from that perspective. So CWTS is mostly Bloom's taxonomy level 1 or Bloom level 1. And then CWNA is some Bloom 1, 2, and some 3. And CWAP is going to be Bloom's level 2 and then 3. So there's going to be more Bloom level 3 exams on there. And the big difference there is about application. So with level 1, you pretty well know definitions to things. With level 2, you know and understand the operation of the thing. And with level 3, you understand the complexity of the environment such that given a scenario, you can understand a solution without necessarily a direct question. So for example, you might not be directly asked, what kind of antenna is this? But instead, you may be asked to explain based on a scenario the kind of antennas that would resolve a problem. So the application level of knowledge is really what you're looking at there. And you see more of those on the professional level exams. So just to help you understand that a little bit, that will help you to grasp the level there. And a question was asked, when you pass the CWAP exam, does it renew your CWNA certification too? And the answer is yes, but there's an important thing to keep in mind. When you pass any professional level certification, it does renew and extend your CWNA for 3 more years. But the professional certifications do not renew the other professional certifications. So for example, if you currently have CWSP and you then pass CWAP, that will extend your CWNA out 3 years, but it will not add the extra time to the CWSP expiration date. So basically the way to think of it is if you get your CWNA in 1 year and then your CWAP, let's say, the next year, now both your CWAP and your CWNA are extended out to 3 years from the time you passed your CWAP exam. If then the next year you pass CWSP, that extends out the CWNA, but the CWAP would still be expiring 2 years later. So basically, from the time you pass your first professional level certification, you have 3 years to pass the other 2 if your goal is to acquire the CWNE certification. Now, additionally, the question was asked about the 90 minutes to take the exam and what that actually means when it comes to taking the exam. The 90 minutes does not include a comment period. So that's the actual exam taking period. From the moment you see that first question till the last or 60th question that you answer, you have 90 minutes rather to take that exam. So that's the exam taking period that you have. Also, the exams are done still at Pearson VUE testing centers worldwide. Like typical high-stakes exams, you can't take any books or notes or cell phones in with you. You're usually given a dry erase board or some kind of note-taking device that is blank that you can take in with you. And what you do with that is up to you. You can dump some information right before you start the exam onto it by writing it out of your mind so you don't lose it under pressure, or you can just use it for calculations or things like that that you might want to do during the exam. So those are the exam details. Now, the CWAP exam is divided into 5 different knowledge domains. And these knowledge domains include troubleshooting processes, 802.11 communications, wireless LAN hardware, protocol and spectrum analysis, and troubleshooting common problems. Now, it's important to keep in mind that these are the knowledge domains for the Certified Wireless Analysis Professional exam. Now, what I mean by that is if you saw a knowledge domain on wireless LAN hardware in the CWSP exam, then of course you'd be focusing on the hardware from a security perspective. Here, you're focusing on the hardware from an analysis or troubleshooting perspective. So it's important to keep that in mind. The knowledge domains fit into the overall area that you're being tested in. And here's the big word I would suggest that you keep in mind: troubleshooting. Because that's really the focus of the exam. The focus of the exam and the certification is on being able to analyze wireless networks such that you can troubleshoot and repair problems. And you could, of course, see even the word troubleshooting in the knowledge domains twice. So the first part, and only 5% of the topics, is troubleshooting processes. So this is understanding methodologies. CWNP has a recommended methodology documented in the upcoming study guide. It'll be in our training courses, in our e-learning, and our practice exams. And we'll also be putting out a white paper with that troubleshooting methodology, so it'll be available in that way. It's basically an industry standard kind of methodology that is based on feedback from wireless network engineers who are out there in the field doing the troubleshooting and giving you guidelines for best practices as you're going through the troubleshooting process. It is also very similar to troubleshooting processes offered by Cisco, HP, Microsoft, other companies as well, but making sure it includes the steps required specific to wireless networking. So you need to understand the troubleshooting methodologies and how they apply to the troubleshooting process. Again, 5% of the exam. Then it's 802.11 communications. This makes up a quarter of the exam, 25%, and it's looking at the communications from the perspective of understanding them for troubleshooting purposes. So making sure that you are able to actually troubleshoot that process that is used to communicate. So this includes quality of service communications and other options as well. And then wireless LAN hardware, 15% of the exam. Here we're focusing on everything from access points to controllers, power over Ethernet devices, these kinds of things, the things that basically are there to make your wireless LAN work. You need to understand them from a troubleshooting perspective. And then protocol and spectrum analysis. So you need to know protocol analyzers and spectrum analyzers in much more depth than you did for CWNA. CWNA was very high level with protocol and spectrum analysis, mostly focused just on what a protocol analyzer does and what a spectrum analyzer does. Now we need to make sure that we can recognize, for example, the RF patterns of different types of devices that might be seen in a spectrum analyzer. We need to know how to use a protocol analyzer to troubleshoot things like connection problems and performance issues and these kinds of things. So it's key to understand protocol and spectrum analyzers in greater depth. And then the last 20% is troubleshooting of common problems. So these would be common problems in two areas: in the wired network as it impacts the wireless LAN, and in the wireless network itself. So you need to be able to troubleshoot both of those because, as you probably know, if you've worked with wireless for any amount of time at all, many problems that appear to be wireless problems are actually not wireless problems at all. Users will often say the wireless network's down, when in actuality the DNS server is down, the DHCP server has pool depletion problems, there's some other issue on the wired side. So we need to be able to understand those, again, as they impact the wireless network. You're not going to be tested on the whole spectrum of everything that happens in a wired network, but you do need to understand the areas that specifically impact wireless networking. So this gives you the knowledge domains to help you understand those. Now the question came in, what is the expected release date for the new study book? It is expected to be released sometime in the month of May. So look for that later on, coming up in the next 30 to 40 days or so. So these are the knowledge domains. As far as training materials, we're going to be using training options that range from training classes that you can attend with our learning partners, where you can go and attend a 3-day class or possibly 4-day if the learning partner chooses to go for 4 days. The classes will be hands-on, and the classes will include, of course, a live instructor. We'll also have e-learning available through our website like we do for our other certifications at this point in time. There will also be practice exams available through our website. So these are all the various learning products that will be available for you as well. And interestingly enough, the question is asked about the spec analyzer shots and whether they will be in color. The answer is that they will be in color in our course guide slides. They will be printed in grayscale in the training materials for attendees. However, our study guides going forward will be published in color. And so those study guides will have color, spec analyzer, and protocol and all other shots. And there will be actual color shots in the study guides that are published by CertiTrek Publishing. So those will be in color. That's a big thing. People have asked for it for years and years from Cybex and McGraw-Hill and all the publishers. And the issue is, of course, if you can't see the color, you can't see the gradation in the actual spec analyzer shots, so you lose a lot of the information. So they will be in color, and all of that information will be there. Okay, so now would be a good time to actually take a look at the new objectives. These objectives will be up at the website within 24 hours or so. And these are the new CWAP objectives so that you can begin looking at them and gaining an understanding for what these new objectives look like. We've already seen this table that's here on the first page of the objectives in the slide. And so this is those knowledge domains that we talked about and the percentage of the exam that they will make up. And by the way, it's very practical when we talk about the percentage of the exam. So troubleshooting processes makes up 5% of 60 questions, right? So you would expect to see 3 or 4 questions related to troubleshooting processes. So that's kind of the way that breakdown is going to be for you when you take the exam. This front matter information here is pretty typical to all of our objectives, including the materials use policy. Then it gets into the actual objectives themselves. As you may have noticed with some of our recent exam releases, we've gone away from the large number of bullet points and to more of a paragraphal format for the objectives. So knowledge domain 1, troubleshooting processes is 5%, and you can see here there are 3 sub-objectives. Understand industry and vendor recommended troubleshooting processes and implement the same to resolve common 802.11 wireless networking problems. Apply the OSI model to the troubleshooting processes and problem resolution methods used in 802.11 wireless networks, which basically means that you need to understand when you're dealing with a layer 1, a layer 2, or even a layer 3 or 4 issue. Use the appropriate tools and network analysis tools and operating system tools to troubleshoot specific problems. These would include no network connectivity, slow network performance, unavailable resources, and unavailable services. So it's going to focus, of course, then on understanding how to use protocol analyzers, spectrum analyzers, and even just built-in tools like ping and traceroute and path ping and ipconfig and IWconfig and other utilities like this. So various different operating systems, of course, have various different tools, and you'll need to understand what they can do. Then in the second knowledge domain of 802.11 communications, making up 20%, we have 4 sub-objectives that are focused on the communications process, including authentication, association, security negotiation, frame transmission, and factors impacting data rates. So it's going to be very important for you to be able to troubleshoot why a particular station may not be achieving the data rates that you desire. Second sub-objective here is understanding the different wireless LAN architectures and how they impact performance and operations. And then the third sub-objective, understanding and explaining the 802.11 frames, which will include the general frame format, and then the various management frames, control frames, and data frames, and how they apply to wireless LAN analysis. And so you'll need to, of course, understand important frames like the beacon frames and the association and authentication frames, and how the 802.1x authentication process works from a frame exchange perspective, and so forth. Fourth sub-objective is understand and explain the 802.11 PHY header and preamble and the indications for wireless LAN performance and operations. Now let me give you a little suggestion here. We're not going to test you on your ability to recall every little bit in the PHY header and even the preamble and what it looks like from a bit perspective. But we do want to make sure that you understand what's the purpose of the preamble and why does it matter? What kind of information is in the PHY header? And how does it impact some type of performance issue or operational issue? And how does it apply to your troubleshooting processes? So always remember, with everything you're studying in CWAP, it comes back to analysis in order to troubleshoot for either the purpose of repair or optimization to try to improve your wireless network. The third knowledge domain I mentioned was wireless LAN hardware. And here we have 5 sub-objectives. So you want to make sure that you understand client devices and operations, including issues related to drivers and supplicants and so forth. So you'll need to understand the role played by drivers and when it might be a driver issue that you're dealing with when it comes to a wireless LAN problem. And then the second sub-objective here, describe and discover access point options, configurations, and behaviors, including internal and external antennas, the Ethernet connections, power options, and management options. So you need to understand the various factors that impact the performance of an access point. Actually, our webinar next month will be on optimizing the configuration of your access points for performance, not necessarily focusing on troubleshooting, but on looking at some of the configuration options that do impact the performance of your APs. The third sub-objective, explain the functionality of wireless LAN controllers and managers, including protocols used, installation locations, and supported data communication options. So we need to understand how our wireless LAN controllers communicate with APs and how APs communicate with them. What communications go back to the controller and what communications are handled in the AP and so forth. Fourth sub-objective, describe and implement wireless LAN analysis hardware for protocol analysis and spectrum analysis. So when we're looking at hardware, because we're troubleshooters, we need to also be looking at the different adapters that support protocol analysis and the spectrum analysis adapters and integrated spectrum analysis and protocol analysis and all of this. And then finally, the fifth sub-objective is describe and analyze wired infrastructure hardware like routers and switches, as well as servers and services. So we need to understand, again, from the perspective of supporting our wireless LAN, what on the wired side is important for us to know. This, of course, includes DHCP, DNS, things like this. So we need to make sure that we understand those components too. Knowledge domain 4, protocol and spectrum analysis, making up 35%. We have multiple sub-objectives here. First of all, describe the common functionality and features of protocol analyzers. So you need to know what is common among the different protocol analyzers. What can they do pretty much across the board? And then demonstrate the ability to install, configure, and use a protocol analyzer to capture and analyze wireless LAN traffic. So unlike CWNA, where it's just understanding what a protocol analyzer does, you actually need to be able to use one if you're going to be a certified wireless analysis professional and if you're going to troubleshoot wireless LANs. So you need to know how to install it and then capture and then also analyze the traffic using features of analyzers like color coding, filtering, these types of things. Third sub-objective, demonstrate the ability to use a protocol analyzer to capture the appropriate wired traffic related to wireless LAN operations. So for example, where do you connect your protocol analyzer if you need to capture your radius communications? What about DHCP? How do you track down a DHCP problem? So these kinds of things are obviously important. Sub-objective 4, and you can see we have a total of 7 sub-objectives in this knowledge domain. Sub-objective 4 is to define terminology related to spectrum analysis. So you need to understand the terms. Signal noise ratio, duty cycle, sweep cycles, signal strength, resolution bandwidth or RBW, and utilization. These are all common terms we use. What do they mean? You need to define those. Understand the common functions and features of a protocol analyzer as it relates to wireless LAN analysis. So now, how do we use a protocol analyzer on the wireless side specifically? Demonstrate the ability to install, configure, and use a PC-based spectrum analyzer to analyze RF activity. So you've got to know about the hardware that's required to build a PC-based spectrum analyzer, the software that's required, and then how to use the various features and views of that software and what they all mean. And finally, sub-objective 7, recognize RF patterns of common devices, including 802.11 devices, Bluetooth devices, microwave ovens, wireless video devices, and cordless phones. So you pretty well know those are explicitly listed. So you want to make sure you know what Bluetooth would look like in a spectrum analyzer. You know what microwave ovens would look like in a spectrum analyzer. Though they look somewhat different, there are some character traits that they have. So it's important to know that if these are listed specifically in the objectives, you're going to definitely want to know those as you prepare for the exam. But you're going to want to study and learn about other RF radiating devices as well. Then the final knowledge domain is troubleshooting common problems. And once again, we have 7 sub-objectives here, making up 20% of the exam. So sub-objective 1, we need to understand wired problems. We're looking at DNS, DHCP, switch configuration, wireless LAN controller access, and power over Ethernet. So how would you troubleshoot an access point, for example, that's unable to locate the wireless LAN controller? That's a good example scenario. How would you troubleshoot a client that's connecting to Wi-Fi clearly, but not getting an IP address? These are the kinds of things we're talking about here. 5.2, understand the ability to troubleshoot wired issues using a protocol analyzer, operating system commands, and hardware troubleshooting. Third sub-objective, select the right location for placement of a protocol analyzer on the wired network. So do you know where to put it if you're troubleshooting DNS, or if you're troubleshooting DHCP, or controller access issues? You need to know where to be able to locate that wired protocol analyzer to accomplish that end goal. Third sub-objective, analyze and repair quality of service issues on the wired side. Quality of service has to be implemented end-to-end. So if you're troubleshooting it, you've got to do it on the wired and the wireless side. Sub-objective 4, recognize and repair common wireless LAN issues like insufficient capacity, lack of connectivity, interference, and QoS problems. 5, diagnose and repair roaming problems including drop voice over IP calls, broken connections, and lack of reconnect. So voice over IP specifically. You want to make sure you understand the issues with it. What causes dropped calls? What causes the lack of ability to reconnect if you've roamed from one AP to another, for example, and so on. Sub-objective 6, understand and repair issues related to wireless LAN security, including authentication, encryption, and MDM. So when it comes to security, do you understand the authentication process enough and how encryption is implemented so that you can actually analyze and understand when it's not working? And then finally, sub-objective 7 is to recognize and repair client-side problems like unstable drivers, configuration errors, incompatible supplicants, and operating system bugs and vulnerabilities. So these are all issues that you want to be able to recognize and repair when they occur. Of course, all of these objectives are covered in the new CWAP study guide that's coming out. They'll be covered in the e-learning that will be available. They'll be assisted in the practice exams and, of course, in our live classes offered by learning partners around the world, which is always a great way to prepare for certification because that instructor is an expert. We do not just hire trainers and use trainers that just know that course. I'm sure you've attended technical classes where they just know that course. In order to teach our courses, they have to have passed the exam with 80% or higher. That's required to become a certified wireless network trainer, and they are very good at what they teach. They've done it, they've lived it. Many of them have come from industry, working for vendors as well as working for consulting firms as well. Now, one last thing in the objectives I want to point out to you. We've started doing this, I believe it was with the release of CWSP. That is a list of terms. So this is a list of terms that you want to make sure you understand what they mean as you prepare for the exam. I'm not going to go over every one of the terms. We could lecture for 5 to 10 minutes on each and every one of them, but it's a list of terms. If you look at one and you don't know the definition, you're in danger with the exam because there may be a question that simply lists that in the question. It's not going to define it. It's not the kind of question that says, which of the following is the best definition of duty cycle? That's not the kind of question you're likely to see. But instead, you'll see duty cycle used either in a question or in an answer to a question. And so it's important that you just know what duty cycle is. So you need to understand all of these terms, and they are key terms to understand. This is not an exhaustive list of terms. This is a list of terms that, based on the objectives, based on the topics being covered in the CWAP exam, you'll want to make sure that you understand.